So hello everyone, and again welcome to our channel. We are the Mindset Junkies and my name is Allie.
And I'm Stephen.
So I want to start off with a bit of an apology. I've got a cold at the moment. I've got a bit of a sore throat and a really horrible bunged up nose. Yeah. So I apologize for my dreadful voice on this recording. I will try and hold back doing too much sneezing and coughing and save you from that horrible vision. So Stephen is going to hold the fort tonight and be the main contributor to our discussion.
Yeah, I will do my best. And seriously, I offered to take this solo, and it just shows the dedication that Allie's with us today, because she insisted on coming on to actually talk through this stuff. As with we say it every week, these are important topics that we go through to basically helping to change your life. So on today's one, as we discussed last time out, we were going to basically look to revisit some of the goals. And this is important because there is a statistic that by typically the middle of February, the vast majority of goals, I think if I recall, it was about 80%, have basically deviated from the progress that we originally set and that we originally started like towards January. So basically we've given up on them completely. And that is an absolutely alarming statistic. But the thing is, it's something that we have almost all been there and experienced. So it's things like, so if you think about the whole fitness thing, right? When I was going training, the people in the gym would say that January is their busiest time of the year, but then by the time it hit February, it was often either back to normal or one of their quietest. And, that's a testament to think that it's also the same for things like our diet, where we religiously follow this week by week. But then we just start to think that, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll just have maybe a little tiny binge weekend. I've done really well, so I deserve it. So, yeah, you end up binging, and you may end up balancing that out a little bit afterwards. You work out a bit more, you hit the gym for a couple of days, you're like, oh, yeah, great, I'll burn that off, it'll all be okay. But then the motivation begins to wane because you've had a taste of what the other life potentially is like. Now, the thing is, what you've done is you've basically set your vision at the start. You've basically become excited by the possibilities. But then what you've done is you've dragged yourself down into what your previous state was. And as a result, months later, you're basically back into the exact same scenario that you were. And your progress has probably, it's gone back to square one, exactly where you were before. And another thing that Tony Robbins often talks about is that this is often actually amplified in certain areas. So we gave the example of diet, fitness, health, and things like that. That if you begin to do this, you will probably end up actually in a worse place than where you were when you first started, because your body actually reacts to it and maybe thinks, right, oh God, it's going to potentially starve me again. I need to consume resources and keep hold of them. Now, the thing to think about is that these small little hiccups, they don't make you a failure. What they actually do is basically make you human. As we said, every single one of us has been through this. I think anyone who tells you otherwise is potentially not telling the truth. The most successful people in the world, they slip up on their habits as well. But the thing is, what separates them, it isn't their willpower or motivation. It's actually their ability to get back on track, to basically get back on that horse and get back out there when there are those slip-ups. It's okay. Everybody has bad days. That's perfectly fine. It's just the way that we actually respond to it. So, there will always be instances when you're following your regular routine, and there'll always be impacts that you have to that make it basically impossible. I know we're labeling the kind of diet, healthy eating example, but it could be something like you're going for a meal for a friend's birthday. That is you can obviously balance things out and say, right, okay, I'll go and have a healthy meal out there. But, it might be a really nice restaurant, like Michelin food or that kind of thing. And it's like, you'd need superhuman willpower to just push back on that. But life's to be lived as well. You've got to enjoy yourself. But the thing that we need to constantly do, and the thing that often kind of results in this mass failure that I spoke about right at the start, is that we're not really tuning back into what it meant right at the start when we first set that goal. So it's about doing that continuous realignment to basically say, like, I set that goal in the first place. I set that goal at the start of the year, whenever it may be. These are the reasons why I've done it. And if you remember back to I think it was one of the very first episodes we did, wasn't it, Allie?
Yeah,
on this, that understanding the why behind the goal is also important, because it's that will give us the motivation to move forward. And when we have these slip-ups, if we don't go back to that, then it just becomes another thing where you then turn around and go, well, it was okay. I slipped. I went and had a nice meal that night. So, a friend's coming over, so maybe I'll have a takeaway. It'll be okay. Oh, actually, some friends are going out for a drink. So, yeah, I'll go out for a drink and that kind of thing. And then that's where you end up on the slippery slope. And that's where things end up failing. This is naturally just one thread of kind of diet, but it was interesting that I was reading a Facebook post from a friend of mine. He runs his own business, which is around organic Facebook marketing. And he had some illness in his family a couple of years ago. And he was talking about this in the post, that he basically had a choice. He could either continue with his business and basically ignore his family. It was actually his younger brother who would have to potentially go into care. Or he could just pause the business for a moment in time, let it go to his partner for her to manage. It'd be a bit of a big burden on her. But his brother will be looked after. And, that's quite a serious thing, because what he was doing was basically balancing. He's got the family on one side, but then he's got his own goals, his own business, his own livelihood on the other. And the thing that he did is he went away and he naturally did the thing that I think the vast majority of us would do, and that's basically go and help the family. Now, he came back, and this is the interesting part of the story, that he said it was about 6 to 12 months, I think it was, that he'd mentioned in his post, that he'd been away altogether, that he'd only kind of dabbled in the business a little bit whilst he was sorting the family out. And he said it was the same people having the same conversations who hadn't moved forward on what they had dreamed of in the first instance. And, a reflection on that is exactly this with this health and diet piece that I'd mentioned, that those same people probably started off doing little tiny things, taking little steps forward, and then going, it could have been, it's not quite working for me, so maybe I'll just try something else, and that doesn't work. And actually, I'm starting to lose motivation now because it's not working. The key is you need to keep tuning back into that why. So what we have is there's basically a few little steps, a few little thoughts to ponder, right, of the different things that we can do here. So I've mentioned one quite a few times here, which this very first one is about shifting the focus from reward to effort. So we've mentioned the why. If we think about the end result and achieving the victory of reaching the goal and how exciting that is, like, really tune in to the emotion that sits behind it. What does it feel like in your heart? What does it feel like in your belly? What does it feel like when you sit, when you close your eyes, when you visualize yourself achieving that end goal? Saying to yourself, kind of bringing it out and saying, like, I can't wait until I get that new job or title. I'm going to look so good at the beach this summer. Yeah. These kind of things can be great motivators. And it's just so easy to set that in our mind at the start and be so full of energy and so full of motivation at the beginning, because our focus is on the end result. But the thing is, when there's a disconnect with our brain's focus before we start our goals, or even as we're going through and we get interrupted, we end up kind of losing that motivation a little bit. So we just have to think, before we start putting the work in, make sure that we are really focused on the reward. And then slowly but surely, if the focus does slip a little bit, then just continuously remind ourselves of why we're doing it. Most things in life, if not everything in life, is hard. You've got to think about these things that, it may have been some goals that you set yourself back in January that you may be looking at now. Now we're talking about this and thinking, those goals, they're not quite working out for me. But you may look at yourself and think, you know what, I can do this. I can do this now. Now that you've just kind of looked back, thought about that future ahead, and that's what we all need to be doing. The key is about redirecting that focus. So the next thought and consideration, so the second one here, is about the way that we may have defined our goals, or maybe maybe the degree to which they are possibly even unrealistic, right? So if we think about the goal, and this plays into a term that, I call, it is a big, hairy, ambitious goal. I was talking about this about a year ago. I can't remember where I heard it, to be honest, but I actually love the idea. And it's this idea that you have this big, huge goal, but it's like, it's not realistic to achieve that tomorrow. Like if you have a big goal that you want to go and help Elon Musk colonize Mars, you're not going to do it tomorrow. So you need to think about what are the steps that you need to do to kind of go and achieve that. It might be you want to become your family's first millionaire. It may be that you want to go and land a job at Google. It may be that you want to lose 100 pounds. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And the thing with these and the goals being either undefined or unrealistic is that you've maybe not put enough depth into them to really understand. There's nothing wrong at all with having bold goals like this. I would actually encourage it. But where the mistake often happens, and where then this difficulty comes in terms of actually then hitting this point where it gets a bit demotivating, is because we've not got granular enough. We've not gone down to that level of, okay, what is it that I need to do tomorrow as step 1 out of 1 million to get to where I need to go to? Mm. So I was just
going to say, as you were saying that there, it kind of reminds me of the conversation that we had back in November about actually starting this. We didn't know where to begin. We just knew that we wanted to do it, but we didn't know how we were going to go about doing it. And we sat down and we went through sort of step by step all of the different things that we actually needed to do. And we ended up dividing up the tasks based on the fact that, you're much more technology savvy than I am. And, I went away and I started to look at some of the other things that we needed to do, but we broke things down into very specific small steps, and we would catch up with each other on a regular basis to sort of say, this has been done, that has been done, the other thing has been done, before we then, took the next big step. So it's like a horse running a race, and it's got fences to make. There is something that has to happen between each fence in order to make sure that that next fence is something that the horse can actually jump. So it's no different in terms of the way that you approach your goals. You're not going to be able to write a best-selling novel at the first crack at it if you struggle to even write a podcast. So it's just sort of like actually get a little bit more realistic about what your ultimate goal is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's easy for us to look, and in the media, social media, you'll always hear that overnight success section, right? It's easy to look at something and think, oh, wow, look at them, they're absolutely flying. But then it's about the effort that took to kind of get to that point.
Yeah, and it's not something that we would necessarily always see. It's that perception that we have, but what's going on in the background has been a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of late nights, a lot of, eating beans on toast for a month, because, you're sacrificing, lots of things to actually meet that next specific thing that has to happen so that big goal can materialize. So, be realistic about your goal and think about, breaking it down into much smaller phases and steps.
Yeah, they're definitely also important. And you mentioned there about the writing a novel, right? And so in breaking this down, right, so we've got the best-selling novel is the end game. But what it might do to get to that point, you might have to write a few different novels to get to that point. So that's the first thing. You might have to write 3 books. But then in that, it's like you've got to think about book 1 of 3 then. So what is it to do to write book 1? So you've got to think, okay, well, what about joining a writers group? Or what about making 1 new video a week that might give you some level of inspiration by putting that out to social media and getting feedback from others? What about writing out a chapter plan? What about writing out just the shell of a chapter? What about even beginning to write one, starting, jotting down ideas, all those kind of things. It's about getting as super, super granular as you can to then basically go on and think, right, I can begin to do this. Because this actually has another benefit, right? So it's then the motivation behind it. So before we started recording this, we were talking about kind of motivation and goals, because we're going into this session naturally. And I spoke about another post that I'd seen on LinkedIn, and it was basically there was a person there looking all frustrated, angry, confused, and they had like little blocks in front of them that all had like exclamation marks, warning signs, danger, and stuff like that. And the person was looking ahead at those things. But what then was in the next image was about 100 little tiny blocks with ticks in boxes behind them. The thing is, what breaking down these goals into these smaller chunks will do for you is allow you to have that rearview mirror where you're going, damn, look at everything that I've achieved there. And it's like this iceberg analogy that I'm sure that we've all seen before, that it's like we've got the surface. The surface is that best-selling novel. But what sits underneath that? There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of heartache. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. There's a lot of sleepless nights. Right? That's just being honest. But then you've got that success, that goal to live to, and it's beautiful. So the number 3, so the next one is where we're possibly taking too much on. There are too many things on your plate. And we've got to be realistic with this, that if we do have multiple goals at the same time, I'm not saying it's an absolute bad thing, but sometimes the goals, they can begin to self-prioritize themselves, and doing so can end up yielding you poor results because you're spreading yourself too thinly, you're all over the place. And you end up then either getting very little done to move each one forward, or you basically don't get anything done because you get overwhelmed, you get frustrated because you're maybe not seeing the progress that you are making, and then you give up with it. So just to think of it with this one, if you feel like you're basically never fully accomplishing one task, or you can't seem to recognize which things are a top priority, then there's a good chance that you have set too many goals at once. So I think in that, just taking a step back and beginning to think, and going back to maybe some of the exercises that we've done already on some of the visioning pieces of like, what is it that my heart is telling me that I should go and do? What is it that warms me up the most? Which goal? And have them both in front of you, visualizing both of them. We often think that we're masters at multitasking, but the thing is, science actually says otherwise. The science actually says that we are not, we are definitely not, that if we focus our attention on multiple things at once, then basically it's like, what's the word, Ali? It's like our focus is, it's kind of not there. I can't think of the word that I'm trying to get out here. Yeah, that's the one.
Where focus goes, energy flows. I
love that quote.
Yeah,
that's the one. Yeah. So then the next one is about the way that we then begin to plan some of these things out. So as I'm sure you've begun to allude to, particularly with that step 2 that we'd mentioned about kind of going down into the detail with things, every single goal will need some level of planning. And others, of course, are going to need a lot more planning than other goals as well. And it's things like if you neglect to work out the steps for how you're going to get from point A to point B, and there might be a point A to Z, then you're probably not going to make it to point B if you don't figure that specific step out. And then naturally, you won't get through all the way to Z. So it could be, for instance, that maybe you want to increase your business's customer base by, I don't know, it could be 20% within the next year. So what is it that you need to do to make that happen? You'll probably need to hire more staff to make that happen. But then in hiring more staff, what does that look like in terms of like the resource plans for that, for the development of them, for the onboarding? What new strategies potentially need to be put in place? What about, say, marketing efforts to actually do that growing once these people are actually onboarded? Does that need to be reworked? Does that need to be discarded? You know, answering questions like these will actually help you in the long run to basically get down into that detail. I think it's a similar one to point two. This is just kind of extending it out into a bit more focus, a bit more detail. Number 5, so we have here, it's basically beginning to lose sight of the why factor. So if you watched our episode on finding your why, you will know how much and how important, how much focus we should actually put on this. So let's just say that you must uproot your family and move to a new town for a new job. Now, if you've got teenagers, then there will probably be some fuss kicked up. You know, they're at a crucial stage of their life. They're potentially leaving some very close friends behind. New friends, new school, new life, it can be tough. But when the inevitable why comes up from them, it must be easy for you as a family to basically say, what are the reasons for you to go? This should be a part of whatever it is that you're aspiring to do. So say it's this goal that's becoming realized that you want to get, I mentioned Google earlier, you want to get a job at Google, but it means that you are going to have to move somewhere else. Then understanding that why and not making it just about yourself is so important. You need to, if you are the family unit, for instance, you have to understand what is the impact on other people as well, and not just yourself. I'm sure that everyone listening kind of knows that. So it may be that, you know, perhaps doing this move means that everybody in the family will have a more comfortable lifestyle. You know, they will have a better security of living. They will be in a safer environment. There will naturally be better prospects for you as well. So the future is much brighter than where it is that you were before. So it's easy to lose focus on the why factor when it comes to working towards a goal. And, you know, this can really hinder our progress. So just make sure that, as we've mentioned already, just make sure you're periodically re-examining why you have that goal in place in the first place. So the next one. Now this one is interesting because it ties in with quite a lot of what we've covered around beliefs in the last couple of episodes. So it's about the way that we will make excuses, that we will tell ourselves the reasons why we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. You know, everybody makes excuses from time to time. You know, rattling off excuses on why a goal isn't worth pursuing or didn't work out is much often easier than pushing forward. So while some excuses, they may well be kind of very valid, you know, others are just absolute total cop-outs. They're basically a convenience. So they're a reason for us to stay in that level of security that we've got. So if a goal is pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone, then we'll go, oh, no, sorry, I don't want to go for my run today because it's raining outside. Brilliant. Okay. Since when has rain hurt you? But the thing is, these are also paralyzing. So if not kept in check, if not really understanding these and making sure that we recognize ourselves when we are making excuses, it can derail every single goal that you attempt. And now I've got a very, very relevant one here, and it's actually just from a few weeks ago. Actually, no, it was 2 weeks ago, this. So I have been putting off, or as it turned out, I have been putting off doing a live webinar in the public domain. And this was around the way that mindfulness can benefit our lives. And a couple of weeks ago, my coach said to me, he's like, look, I've recognized that you've been making, to be fair, they are kind of valid excuses, but I'm not standing for it anymore. So what I want you to do is from today, you're going to get as many people as you can onto a webinar. You're going to tell me what date it is that you're going to do it, and you're going to go and do it. And this was massively uncomfortable. Just being honest, it was massively uncomfortable. I do these sessions regularly in my corporate job. I do them so often. I'm asked on a regular basis to come and do Q&As about mindfulness, about to lead different meditations, all that kind of thing. And I just do them fine. I've got the content, I go and deliver them. Customer demonstrations, I do them fine, absolutely spot on. Presenting, I am perfectly fine with. This, I was in bits with. So I was saying to my wife before the session that it was like I was feeling a bit nauseous, a little bit ill. And she turned around to me afterwards and she said, you know, the thing is, that's how the vast majority of people feel when it comes to them doing a public presentation. So the reason I mention this is because I had been making excuses after excuse after excuse to not do it. You know, as I say, some of them were valid excuses. It was like, oh, well, I need to get the engagement right. I need to make sure I'm getting people involved. I need to have sign off from my meditation team to make sure that I can go and use this for my certification, all that kind of thing. But they were just excuses. And then as soon as I went and delivered that at the end of it, so I was messaging you, Allie, afterwards, weren't I? And saying that, like, it was incredible. I felt so good at doing that session. And now I'm riding the wave and I'm going to do another. So there's another side to this that, you know, if we make the excuses but then overcome them, then can we turn it into a bit of a snowball effect and actually have it so it will actually be momentum to drive us forward? Because, you know, what we've seen all the excuses that we was making. We've realized that they were just a load of rubbish. So we've just gone and, you know, let's do it anyway. You know, let's have fun. Get rid of some of them flimsy excuses.
And I was just going to add to that as well, that, you know, when you actually make excuses for, you know, not carrying on with your goal or not achieving your goal, the ripple effect of that is that you do actually at some point have a conversation with yourself. And you kind of will beat yourself up. You will perhaps take on additional limiting beliefs that your goal was actually part of you trying to get over. So it's only ever going to come back to you tenfold when you put off the inevitable. And it's so easy to walk away from a particular goal. That's a momentary decision, but ultimately it will always come back in the long run to haunt you to a degree. So I guess what we're saying is it leads on to the next point, which is all around, you know, that fear of failure, which is in a way why a lot of people will actually make the excuses in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And you've raised a reminder there, Allie, because I had my review session after with my coach, and he was talking about basically the person that I had to become to step out of that comfort zone and just forget about all the excuses and just go ahead and do it. And that's the thing. It's that like all those little steps that I'd mentioned, right? That is a step that I'm going to add on that kind of pile that I look back on and think, right, you know, I've done it. It's fine. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. Yeah. And it's the same for you when it comes to your goals, that if you overcome them excuses, then begin to use them as motivators going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I always ask myself that question, who do I have to become in order to achieve my goal? And one of the things that I have to become to achieve my ultimate goals is to become a bit more technology savvy. I have to sort of like face that fear and spend the time learning a little bit more about it and actually doing it. So, you know, I have to become lots of different things in order to achieve the goals that I want to achieve. And that's not a bad thing to take on those additional bits of knowledge and skill set. It's a good thing.
Well, then you've got a tech geek here, Ali, so it's all right. So yeah, that's like one of the steps, you know, it's all right, tech side covered. So with this fear of failure and kind of going back to that example that I gave of me with the webinar, right? So deep down, and I reflected on this a couple of times, right? So one of the reasons why I was so reluctant to go ahead, it was this thing of what happens if nobody signs up? What if I get people signing up, but then nobody turns up? It's those kind of things that can potentially cripple us. And it's this imposter syndrome piece of like, you feel as though, oh, I'm not good enough. Why would anyone buy something from me or come and listen to me when you could go and listen to a webinar done by an expert and a pro? Nobody wants to fail. And a fear of failure often stems from, it's kind of that need for perfectionism. It's that view that we look at these people that I actually mentioned last week. So like the Tony Robbins and the Jack Cornfield, they're up here, I'm down here. How can I possibly compete? Their stuff's perfect. But it's like, if you think about it, like take Tony, for instance, he's been doing his work for 40, 50 years. He's had 40, 50 years to perfect this, to know the little tiny intricacies that he needs to focus on to trigger people in a certain way. How when somebody is acting a certain way in the audience, what he needs to do to just click of a fingers, turn them around. So just to ask yourself in that respect, like when you look up to these experts, then what is it that you're seeing? And then what deep down is actually behind that? And it's often that, they've been exactly where you are at one point in their life.
Yeah. Comparing yourself to someone else. And never a good thing.
Yeah. So, we often avoid taking risks because of this, because we have that fear of failure. But the thing is, it's no way of actually going through life. And the good thing is that by looking at why you have a fear of failure, you can actually learn to overcome it, and you can avoid letting it sabotage your goals. So former President Teddy Roosevelt, and I'll just have to read this quote. So nothing in the world is worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. So that to me sums it up, because if we think about the things that I spoke about earlier, that all these successes that we're seeing out in the world, like if we take a footballer, for instance, like one of the current ones is Jude Bellingham in the England squad, right? He's one of the youngest in the team. Phenomenal ability. But what has him and his family had to do for the past probably 14 years of his life, since he was like 4 or 5 years old, maybe, to get to that position? It was probably like on Saturdays in the rain, in the snow, sitting, watching, playing football, sitting in queues of traffic, taking them to training every single day. The money that it has taken to then go and do that, there's all this stuff that sits underneath it that they've got to go. And now he's bearing that fruition. He's doing something that he absolutely loves. He's getting the financial rewards associated with it too. So the next one is about failing to anticipate what potential obstacles we could come across. So with this one, you got to think that the nice, beautiful, shiny goal of yours, right? You've got this perfect picture in your mind as to what it's going to be. It's a too good to fail plan that you've got around it. But then as you're going along, bang, something comes up. Problems arise. We've been darting all over the place a bit with certain examples here, but let's go back to the one right at the start of, living a more healthier lifestyle, watching what you eat. A prime example here is that, just like Allie is today, you get ill. When you get ill, you want comfort, right? You either don't eat anything because you're so ill, it makes you feel sick, or there's the opposite side where, I'm just sat here, I'm really feeling sorry for myself, I'm feeling ill, I think I just need to have some comfort food. And, that's perfectly fine. These problems arise, the obstacles get in the way. What you need to do in this respect is understand what those potential obstacles are and what your plan would be to begin to overcome some of these. What kind of things would you put in place? As we've said before, it is okay to deviate from goal as long as you understand what you need to do to get back on track for that. In terms of the feeling, that's perfectly fine. Everybody gets ill at some point. But what are you going to do to make sure that as soon as you've recovered, you're back on track to going through what you were before? Ooh, my throat's getting a bit dry there, Allie.
And how you feel?
Nice British cup of tea. My sister gave me these Fortnum and Mason stuff. Not as good as a Yorkshire tea. Not as good as a Yorkshire tea.
No, it's not.
No Yorkshire tea. Anyway, we digress. So yeah, with the obstacles, you're not going to be able to predict everything, right? But it's at least trying to understand what are potentially some of the risks that you face, and then what are the incentives that you can begin to create that when those risks do come true, like what is it that you can do to actually make it so you're not going to lose your focus?
Yeah.
Have that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, really having some good problem solving skills as well, because even if you've got a really good plan A and a half decent plan B, there will always be curveballs that come your way. So when you do come up with something that you didn't anticipate, don't get scared about it. Take time to breathe. Lean into the situation and start to sort of think strategically about what are your options. Don't let any option be off the table, but really sort of think creatively about what some of the options might be. And I think a lot of people, when we went into lockdown, going back to the health and fitness situation, when the gyms closed and people were on their trajectory that particular time to get fit and get healthy again, it would be so easy for them to say, well, the gyms have closed now. That's it. My plan to get fit and healthy has just gone right out of the window. Yeah. But a lot of people actually worked around that, and they found different ways to actually stay on track. Yes, the overall plan changed a little bit. They might have ended up, rather than going to the gym and lifting weights, they started to lift the sofa or lift other things around the house, or do what I did and get a big tractor tire and start moving that. You find other ways to actually still achieve your goal, maybe not with the traditional ways that you went about things. So there are options. Don't let excuses or curveballs come in and actually deviate you from your goal. There is always a plan C.
Yep, 100%. And a couple of examples based on what you said there spring to mind with this. So when the pandemic started, I noticed a couple of things. So just as it was starting, I had I was about to order the Peloton bike. And I remember I delayed it by a couple of weeks. I can't remember the reason why I delayed it. I think I was just unsure whether I was going to go the PT route or the Peloton. And I then checked back in when I'd made that final decision. I'll definitely do it. And it was about a month extra to wait to get it, because obviously people had seen that the pandemic was coming. It was on the horizon. And they needed something like that to help them with their fitness in the house, because the gyms would be closing. And if you're a business leader as well, so if you're a leader in not just a corporate, but in just a general business, then thinking about what the strategy is that you have, or what it is you intend as like, say, a benefit or stuff is a prime example here. So with my corporate job, one of the benefits that we get is a wellness allowance each month. So this is to go and spend on gym memberships, spend on like healthy supplements and all things like that. And originally they said no equipment, no hard physical assets are allowed on this. It's only the like memberships and food and stuff like that. But then when the pandemic came, they shifted, they pivoted, because they recognized, right, okay, it's pointless us giving people money to spend on a gym membership when the gyms are closed. So let's help them to have fitness at home by allowing them to go and make the purchases, and then us help to kind of subsidize those purchases for them to allow them to maintain that fitness. And it's because employee wellness, employee health is one of the key elements of what the company focus on, employee success, basically. So, it can be in a number of walks of life, is what I'm trying to say, that these different plans could come into place. So another one to consider is then around the deadline that you set, or in most cases don't set. So whether it's trying to learn a new skill, or maybe it's you're trying to become the next Richard Branson, that make sure that you do set a deadline for yourself and write it down and tell someone. So what the research suggests is that you're around about 40, 41%, 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you do write them down. If you don't put a deadline on them, then they're not going to happen. So you may be wondering, okay, so why is the deadline so important for accomplishing a goal? And the thing that it does, it holds you accountable for your time. So let's say that you want to lose 20 pounds, okay? When is it that you want to lose 20 pounds by? If you set a deadline for the 1st of June, you'll either meet it or you won't. The deadline puts the pressure on you to basically get up and go to work. Talking too much, I think, Allie.
I don't mind taking over if you want to.
No, it's okay. I just need more tea. That's all. Yeah. And you know, there's a really good example that sits underneath this. That's quite funny. So on the tech side, to have a website, you need to have a web domain. So you need to go out into something like a GoDaddy or Google Domains, and you need to buy that web domain. And I remember there was a tweet a while ago, one of Elon Musk's many tweets, basically saying that there is nothing more depressing than getting an email saying that your web domain is expiring and you've taken no action on it. Because basically a web domain, you get a 12-month subscription for that domain. Or you can buy extras as well. You can buy extra time too. And what he's suggesting is that, you know, if you buy that domain and don't do anything with it, it's like, you know, I'm looking back to what that idea was 12 months ago and I've done nothing with it. So, you know, perfect example kind of right there. So another one is around how we either let people in, or maybe even how we don't let people in, but how people let themselves in, to basically what our goal is and the impact that they potentially have on this. And it's about that doubt. So the bigger the goal, the more people you may have that are actually doubting that you will accomplish it. It's easy to listen to the naysayers. It's easy to allow their doubt to sidetrack and even basically derail what it is that you're doing. It's easy for them to tell you from the sidelines to say why it is that you're not going to achieve it, what it is that's going to go wrong. You're always going to have critics. You're always going to have haters. Right, so one of the key things with this is to not allow the doubts of others to get the best of you, and instead just use it as fuel for the fire to basically knuckle down and to create that focus to help you to forge ahead. Because I often hear that, you know, when somebody's kind of casting doubt, they may be looking out for you, but then you also have to question, is it elements of their insecurity as well that is actually causing them to begin to want to, probably subconsciously, just to be honest on their part, begin to derail it? Because sometimes you have to think that what happens if you become super successful in this? Does it actually shine a light on them and the fact that they haven't actually taken any action and improved things in their life? So in the previous episodes, we talked about the limiting and empowering beliefs. And I think this is important to revisit this, because in those episodes, you can get a feel for some of these challenges and understand where it is that they potentially derail you. So the next one is, we've definitely procrastination. So Abraham Lincoln reportedly once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe, and then the rest of the time cutting down the tree." So out of all the reasons why we fail to achieve our goals, none are probably as deadly as what procrastination is. So it's easy to tell yourself that, you know, you'll start doing this thing tomorrow, or that you'll reach an obstacle in your plan and maybe decide to handle it later. You know, it's okay. I've got too much on right now. I'm just going to delay it. It's fine. The thing is, too many times, though, later never comes. motivation dies out. We forget about that why that we focused on earlier. According to a Harvard Business Review, one of the best ways to beat procrastination is to publicly commit. So it comes to this one I mentioned earlier about writing the date down and sharing it with somebody with the goal. Like, most people want to avoid looking lazy or looking like a failure and telling others, we're going to do something, because it basically reinforces it in our brains to basically focus on the reward and that end game. It's one of the reasons why coaches are well worth the investment. At least from my perspective, I find it embarrassing if I have to go to a session with my coach and say, I'm sorry, I haven't done it. I haven't done what I said I'm going to do. It's embarrassing. So this public display of basically talking about what goal you want to achieve is really basically making you accountable. That's exactly what it's doing. And the coach is there as basically the accountability partner naturally. They're the one that will point the finger and say, why haven't you done it? So just think carefully about how and who you want to share your goals with. Choose an option that will hold you accountable and not let you off the hook too easy. This is also a great time to think about an accountability buddy, or, as we mentioned, a coach who may actually help you to get you started and get you back on track. And there's a story here that I came across in my first meditation teachings of the importance of sharing the vision, sharing the goal. And it was about one of the early people in Google. His name was Gopi. He had a goal that one day he wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. But the thing is, he didn't tell anybody about this goal. And 13 years passed when he thought about this goal, and nothing had happened. He'd done nothing on it. But then he went to one of these workshops that I was eventually taught to teach. And he was encouraged to open up and share the goals publicly, just as we're saying to do now. And it so happened the person that he shared it with was the founder of the program in Google, another early employee. And he had some quite serious connections out in the East. So he shared his goal, and the response was, great, we'll see what we can do. I'd love to try and help you with that. Not expecting anything to happen. A number of weeks, a number of months came by. And then a conversation happened. And it was an opportunity to go out to Dharamsala in India and potentially meet the Dalai Lama. To fast forward a couple of months, I think it was, it ended up happening. The meeting took place. He got to spend some time with him. He got to talk with him. And he said at that time, it was one of the best moments in his life. And that was all down to the fact that he had shared his goal with somebody. 13 years of inaction. And then a small period of time to make it happen. Because the other side to think about with this is it's not necessarily just about the accountability, but it's then about who else might know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who can then help me to make that goal happen. Mm-hmm. Do you have any views or experience on this, Allie?
I have a wonderful experience of this happening to me when I was back in the Royal Navy. I had, from a little girl, always had a bit of a fascination with space and astronauts and all of that kind of stuff. A bit geeky in that respect. And anyway, when I joined the Royal Navy, I mentioned to someone how I would really love to be able to either go to Cape Canaveral or go to NASA Space Center in Houston, Texas. And I just happened to have a conversation with someone about it. Little did I know that within about 2 months, there was going to be a signal that came into the ship that I was based on, looking for volunteers to actually go out to Texas to essentially do a driving job for nearly 3 months at the NASA Space Center, essentially just moving astronauts from one building to the next.
Wow.
And she gave me first opportunity at seeing that request so that I could get my request in with my captain as early as possible. And actually get myself to the top of the list. Anyway, long story short, I actually spent 3 months out at NASA doing something that was, driving around, but the experience was unbelievable. If I'd not shared that, then I would never have had that opportunity to be given that signal and get my request in with my captain as quickly as possible. So, you just never know. You just never know who you might want to share something with, someone who just knows someone who knows someone, and they remember what your goal was and they want to help you.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's my little ditty on that one.
Great. And of all the conversations we've had, I never realized that he was a space geek like me. So yeah,
there you go.
You're sharing, learning.
There you go. Yeah. So I think what we're sort of saying there is you've listed a long list, I think, of reasons why our goals fail. And, there's probably another list of them as well. But I think these are probably the main ones that we would all recognize. And as long as you can acknowledge why your goals fail and you address them, you can get back on track or even reprioritize your goals or resolutions. And when you realize that failure is not really failure, it is actually an opportunity to reassess your goals and learn from some of your mistakes, you do stand a much better chance of getting right back on track. And as you've already said, Stephen, on a number of occasions, and we know this to be true, every successful entrepreneur in life has had to rethink their strategies. So you are no different.
Yeah, so, it's absolutely incredible point, right? That all you have to do is just think about what the opportunities are around kind of reassessing those goals. And, what we're going to do. So, we've already spent kind of a lot of time going over this. So what we thought is that we would look to split this episode out. So the next episode that we'll cover off is the specific strategies that if it's not being clear to you through the things that you've maybe been doing wrong, it'll be looking forward to kind of what we can begin to do to actually begin to change some of these things going forward. So, that's what I think we'll do in the next session. How does that sound, Ellie?
I think it sounds great. And I know we talked earlier on this week about when the next one would be. And I think we're going to record on Monday, which means that it could be out as early as Tuesday. So we're not going to give you too much time to have to wait for the 7 strategies that you could use to help get you back on track. We're going to create a little bit of space here, gives you an opportunity to sort of like think back why you might be failing in your goals. And then next time we're going to jump right in and give you some strategies that you could use to actually get back on track. And that will be out in early part of next week. So not too long to wait. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, thank you for tuning in.
Absolutely. And as always, please subscribe, like and share our videos or our channel with anyone that you think would benefit from it. It really gives us an opportunity to continue to create this content for you. And we do have some great videos coming up in the following weeks that we think that you will enjoy and get inspiration from as well.
Definitely. Enjoy, and thank you for Ali for turning up when not feeling 100%. I know how tough that can be. So
thank you for doing most of the talking as well. And you've obviously got a little bit of a tickle going on as well.
I do. Yes.
Well, nice to see you all, and see you next week.
All the best.